We wait for Kartika. Yeah, we are live again.
You're like, okay. So, welcome everybody. Welcome to Women Who Venture. This is our first panel discussion. Though we've been running with Mumbai for the past 3 years, we've always wanted to have a panel discussion. We've never been able to get everything in place, and we're really excited that this has happened finally. And it is happening on International Women's Day. That's another feather on the cap. So, we are really thrilled that this is happening together. And a huge thank you to all of our panelists who have agreed to be here with us. Thank you for joining us. Just a quick introduction on what WIDS is and how all of this is happening. We have two chapters here. I and Kartika and Khushbu and Aksa started WIDS Mumbai in 2018. And this year, I've started one for Kerala as well because I've joined a company that's in Kerala. So why not? And it's along with me, I have Binita and Prashansa, who are also my co-ambassadors. Again, both Mumbai and Kerala are two cities that have amazing amount of potential. There are so many clubs in both of these cities focused on technology. There was like startup village in Kochi that we used to usually gather right from the days when Android was just launched. We had all of these different clubs for every single new technology out there. When Kaggle came into place, we had conferences for that, meetups for that. So there's a lot of opportunity, a lot of talent. So WIDS definitely tries to create a platform and a community that brings in experts and students, creates a platform where students can learn from the experts, and mentors and mentees mentorship can happen. And there are just remarkable women out there who can just be put together in one room, and let's see what happens. So we also have this mission right from Stanford. It began in 2015. The mission is basically to inspire and educate data scientists worldwide, regardless of gender, and to support women in this field. So, this image that you see currently is actually 2019. So, from 50 countries, it has increased to 75 plus countries and 175 plus events. So currently there's this 24-hour huge conference that's happening worldwide where we are all meeting together from different countries. And this is the one mission is to just basically create this platform that supports women and inspires, regardless of who you are, where you're from, to take up a job or take up data science, the field of data science. So one of the main reasons why we're encouraging everybody, regardless of who you are, where you're from, is because we all know if you are given a huge amount of data, you can wrangle it into whatever you want. If you have a very if everybody in your team is exactly the same and has had the same experiences, then you're going to have a different set of results versus if you had a very diverse set of team. So if the more diverse your teams are, the better your results can be. So therefore we wanted a thing like WIDS to happen, and that'll encourage more people to take up the field. And I strongly believe that women, there is stats to actually support my beliefs that women are the strongest supporters of any non-profit organization that you take up or imagine or close your eyes to even think about it would be led by women. So why not skill these women with the right tools, empower them to have the ability to do data analysis, derive insights from data, because everywhere around you, if you have a lot of data and if you can use that to drive your decisions, what could be better than that? So currently we have chosen this topic as women-owned businesses to be our topic for our panel discussion, mostly because there's a huge rise of such businesses. I couldn't find a lot of stats for India specifically and what is the number right now, but in US, I think there's like 4 out of 10 businesses are owned by women, and I think Black women see like a lot of like 600 percentile was the stats mentioned that they become successful in their businesses. So when the creativity of women clubbed with data science, that makes them uniquely empowered to make a huge impact on our society. And we're going to find out how three of these are going to be making an impact. So I'm really excited to give this panel discussion a go ahead, and I'm happy to have Ketaki with us. She has joined with Mumbai recently and is a person in STEM. I would actually like Ketaki to introduce herself and take over the panel discussion. She's going to be the moderator for the entire session today. And this Karthik also here, who would also be moderating this towards the end. So, welcome everybody once again. Hope we have a great time.
Thank you, Julian. Thank you for having me. I'm Ketki Vaidya, as Julian already mentioned, and I work as a software developer for the artificial intelligence team in Oracle. I'm based out of Hyderabad, but because of work from home, I'm now in Mumbai, and therefore I'm contributing to the Events Mumbai. And I'm really glad that I get the opportunity to host this panel discussion with three powerful women, and I hope to unveil the secrets behind their brain and what makes them so powerful, and hopefully we will get a lot of interesting perspective today. So now I'll start the panel discussion, and I'll start with you, Ritu. I want you to first introduce yourself to everyone so that we can get even more inspired by your energy. Yeah.
Thanks, Ketiki. Hi, everyone. I'm very blessed to be here, and I'm a big fan of everything that WIDS does. I learn so much from the community, and I'm inspired by the community every time I attend a session or every time I see something that you guys put out. Thank you for creating a community for women like us. And it's great to be able to sometimes just know that there's someone else out there as well, and that you're not crazy for being this 0.01% of we shall do iters. My name's Ritu. I grew up in Kenya in Australia. I moved to India 6 years ago, and I started the Data Duck a while back. One of my newer businesses is Alumbloom, which is a closed community platform for alumni communities to thrive, alumni tribes to thrive. That's our tagline, and I really got to remember it. And we've recently launched Oasis Health Tech, which is a data-led tool that allows surgeons to plan surgeries.
All right, and can we move to you, Ramya, next?
Sure. Thank you for the introduction, or thank you for bringing us all together on this amazing platform. This is amazing, and thank you for having me today to talk and share my experiences. Thank you, Ritu. That was fascinating to hear. You started almost two separate companies with Alumbloom and then Oasis Healthcare. It's amazing. And then your Datadog platform. So I am a very recent graduate. I graduated in 2019 as a computer science engineer from IIIT Delhi, holding a minors in computational biology and this passion in neurotechnology and making neuroscience more palatable to people, grounding neuroscience principles in easy language so that people can utilize and understand. That's where there's so much research that's going into understanding your brain, why you do what you do, understanding why mental health disorders occur, and this knowledge is not being percolated down to everybody. Everybody just from the outside thinks of it as a very difficult field and doesn't even get into. So I want to break these barriers and make neurotechnology commonplace so that more and more people come into this field and this field grows into what it can become. um, right now my company is personalizing mental health care using brain stimulation and brain activity sensing using EEG.
Right. I think these are a set of complicated words that we'll soon understand. But next we move to Ayushi. And Ayushi, I don't know if it's possible for you to switch on your video, because I just want to, that'll really help to have some facial communication. If you can switch on your video.
Sorry, so I'd been traveling, and that's why I was just like, it wouldn't really help. Thank you so much. It wouldn't really help for you to have actually my face visible.
No pressure at all. No pressure at all.
No, but yes, now I'm just heading inside. So yeah, hi everyone. This is Ayushi. I'm the COO and co-founder of Drona Maps, which is a platform to enable large-scale 3D mapping with drones. But we're basically, if you think about it, it's a command and control center solution. So I'm just gonna give a very stupid example, but like if you've seen any of the movies where you see people like sitting around in a room, like talking to each other, looking at a bunch of screens as to what is happening, and it's a crisis situation. So that's kind of what we do, except like it's all built on top of 3D drone data and has like drone live feeds into it, and is deployed in like crisis situations or actually even day-to-day execution of any governance or large-scale execution projects. So most of the work we do is usually with large-scale government clients or enterprises. So yeah.
All right. Thank you for switching on your video. And you were actually giving me the vlog feels as you were walking into talking about it. So,
Yes,
Naveen,
yes. So
I think
you're like looking at the entrepreneur life.
yeah, I think what's common about the three of you is that each of you have your own brainchild. And I would like to start with you, Ritu, and understand what led to this brainchild, what inspired you to start your company.
Sorry, could you repeat that? What something size? What?
Brainchild. I'm not sure if you can still hear me, but I was talking about what motivated you to start your company.
Ah,
Yeah, brainchild.
my brainchild. I was like, my brain size. I'm like, that's something I should talk to Ramya about because I have no idea about my brain size. So what led me to start my company was that I'm seriously impatient. I was working for government and I found it to be really slow, really frustrating. And yeah, I just wanted everything. I wanted everything to move faster. And I wanted people to take decisions and I wanted people to take risks and I wanted to have an impact. And wherever you start as a fresher, I think maybe things are different now, but like 20 years ago when you started as a fresher, it was decision making was very much top down. It was, you know, very much do as I tell you kind of thing, and especially for someone who wears like crazy prints and, you know, and working in STEM, you know, they don't really fit in the old school mind. So yeah, I think I just wanted freedom, and it wasn't a brainchild as such. It was just that I wanted to get paid, I wanted freedom, and I wanted to always generate employment. I think that's one of the best things we can do is to create employment and support families.
Right. So it was. We can safely say that this was your purpose, and it had been percolating since a long time. Right. Thank you so much. So next, we'll move to you, Ramya. Do you think there was a specific incident that led to the company, or did you plan of it since a long time?
Mental health and neuroscience has always been on my mind from a long time. But coming to this fellowship where I actually met Kartika also, she's my, we are actually batchmates of a fellowship. And there I also met my co-founder. And that's where, you know, we both were like, okay, we have these particular skill sets. We both have these particular experiences that have led us to develop these skill sets. Can we make use of it? And let's start our program. Basically, it's as simple as that.
I think your voice was echoing, but now it's clear. So next, we'll move to you, Ayushi. Do you think that you'd always planned to start a company, or was it a sudden impromptu decision?
So now you have me in a better like format. So I figured that part out. No, actually, no, not at all. Like I come from an academic family. Like what I had usually seen was, you know, you went abroad, you studied, you did your grad school, you sort of found a stable job, the picket, you know, the picket fence fantasy. Like that's kind of what it usually is. Except like, I think I would echo like before me, I think Ritu like actually had pointed out, like a lot of it was about trying to find your own space in everything. And in my case, it was So I grew up like heavily seeped into humanities and design, and I did engineering as a kid. I think that's just because, I mean, it's sort of an default education in India. But I think like everything sort of like amalgamated and gave like a lot of perspective. So the first startup eventually happened midway through Hopkins. It was actually like mental health space. It was digital health with like we were actually using NLP for providing peer support and therapy, like scaling peer support and therapy for PTSD, substance abuse cases in particular. And so that was the first foray, and primarily the way it happened for me was more like, my co-founder's pitch was very simple. Actually, he was like, you paint, you do photography, you can figure out UI UX. And I was just like, people do entire degrees in this stuff, so it's not like I'm like an expert, but okay, I'm gonna like reverse engineer this thing. I'm gonna see things that are working, I'm gonna try and break down the process, and I'm gonna pick up tools, like, and which is kind of what we did through a large part of the grad school. So and that's how the first startup happened. And then eventually I kind of like, you've tasted blood at this point. I've never actually held like a day job that pays. So like, I don't know like what it's like. So for me it was at this point of time, like I had gotten like this one thing that you can pour all aspects of your thought process to, like be the business side of it, which is trying to look for feasibility consistently or impact consistently, or the tech side, which is trying to do something and push boundaries as far as technology was concerned, and then like the design side, which is trying to make all of this like usable and like nice, and like so that it like integrates with like life. And I think like with Drona Maps, or with like even my first company, I was looking for using that emerging tech for any sort of positive human impact.
And I think the fact that you did not have a stable job before that really helps, because you can take more risks and you don't have anything to fear about.
No, I think it could go both ways, to be really honest. Like I think if you were to look at like how stable jobs, like they give you
Hmm.
structure, and they give you like an inherited way of thinking and like doing things, which is often efficient, right? Like we break things and then we realize that, okay, oh, there's a reason why these guys were doing it for like this for like 50 years. So like there is also that realization. But at the same time, in terms of mindset, I think you could argue that case, that if I did, it would have been very hard for me to like. I think there is this quote somewhere which is famous in consultants, that the most addictive thing in the world is a monthly salary. So like the more you get of it, the harder it is for you to leave the system. But having said that, like I do now meet a lot of entrepreneurs from backgrounds who have like corporate experience or like even businesses of their own before this point. And I think like nothing precludes you from being an entrepreneur except to like often yourself or circumstances. So yeah. Good go
Right.
either way.
I think you make a great point there, that we often are our own hurdle and we don't realize that. So this enormous self-awareness that precedes before you actually start a company, that is definitely commendable in all three of you. And the next question for the three of you is, I'll start with you, Ramya. I want to understand that when you started your company, you obviously had a lot of things going before that. And how did you manage to find time to research on this idea before you could actually turn it into a company?
So I was fortunate that way. We were in a fellowship, and the major part of the fellowship was just learning, right?
Mm-hmm.
And apart from just the things that we were doing as part of the fellowship, AI and ML, apart from that, I was heavily researching into neuroscience, mental health, and also we had an ongoing project with a professor going on. We were working on uh, EMG signals, basically operating uh, things around you using muscular movements, but seamless muscular movements. And these muscular movements we captured through EMG signals.
Mm-hmm.
They're also related to thought signals coming to your muscles, and we us capturing those signals. So while we were doing that, we gained a lot of experience and insight into what can be done in this area, and that's how we started this company and got into this field. And it was a process of 6 to 7 months, all leading up to this one moment of us deciding, okay, let's do this.
Right. So you say around 6 to 7 months of extensive research, and then finally being
Yeah.
ready to take the risk of actually turning it into a company.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. You cannot just wake up one day and say, like,
Obviously.
snap your fingers and I know I'm ready. That never happens. It's
Yeah.
always like, especially as women, there's a lot of doubt associated with this, and you're like, is this the right way to go? Why isn't anybody else doing this? Can you do it? Should you take the risk? Who will listen to you? All of this does come into the picture, but it's a process of you getting over these small hurdles. Your support system matters, the people you talk to, the role models you see, and also the world is also changing and evolving. There's a lot of amazing women out there that you can look up to and draw inspiration from, and break boundaries as they have, and as are the ones on call today, breaking boundaries today. I think it's all out there, and it's just a matter of mindset and research. Yeah, we did put our work in and finally start this company. Yes.
Yeah, that's interesting to know, and I'm going to get into more details of that. But first, I want to understand from you, Ritu, and I'm going to dovetail on Ramya's point here that we often we don't realize, and we are our biggest hurdle, and we don't feel like we're ever ready. So, how did that moment occur in your life where you decided that this is the moment that I start my company, this is the moment that my research is done, and I feel like I'm ready?
I don't know if you ever get over that hurdle.
Right.
And I think constantly second guessing yourself, there's a fine line between a healthy self-critique and an unhealthy self-doubt. And it's very, very fine. And I think getting out of our heads sometimes gives us a lot of perspective, but getting right back into them, because that's the asset we have, right? So we've got to stay there a little bit. I tend to take a few vacations where, although I'm operationally available, I'm not doing anything work-wise, and I feel like when I come back from them, I have a renewed vision and I'm much more positive than before I left for them. I think that sort of as we grow, one of the hardest things for me is to not be in the details. As we scale and grow, it's really tough to everyone's going to make mistakes. We are human and we make mistakes, and we need to allow that learning curve for other people, but to watch it and be like, oh, they're making a mistake, let me not correct them, is something that I had to learn. So now I let the team make their mistakes and watch from afar and let them come to their own realizations, and watching them grow has been fascinating and phenomenal for me. So yeah, getting out of my head and also getting out of their spaces has been key, I think, in growing a company and scaling it.
Right, and I think it must be particularly different to establish the balance in this case, because you always feel like there's something more that you can do for your company, and it's your own. You've put all of your passion and all of your energy into this. So there must be always something that you can do to make things right, and that constant attention to working for your company, that can really get to you. So unless you find time to recharge and have something like the way that Bill Gates does, he has think. I think you do something very similar. Think week, where you
Yeah.
go and revitalize yourself. So that's a really good strategy. And I think no matter whether we are an employee or whether we start our own company, these weeks of self-love and the self-care, those are really, really important for us to get back on track and be ourselves again. So next, I will move to you, Ayushi. I want to understand how much of your time did you allocate towards researching on that idea before you started this company?
I think first of all, what I want to do is like distance myself from the phrase that we are our biggest hurdle, because that kind of like, it sounds very motivational booky. And I don't want to get into that arena, because how much time did I take? Like, to be honest, it was a very long process. And it was slow boiling a frog. Like, I was in it, doing it, like executing it, running it before realizing that I was doing any of those things. I was willfully choosing not to join like highly paid jobs just because I'm doing this thing on the side. I'm extending my degree because I'm doing this thing on the side. And at any given point of time, so it's not like the research was not happening, it's not like the work was not happening, but nothing prepares you to be an entrepreneur, but being an entrepreneur. So it's like the process itself is what teaches you, and no amount of research. Like, I think idea validation does happen, and idea validation is something that you can sort of test, but frankly, like whatever idea you start with, there is a 99% chance you would not end up executing it. Like, it changes your idea of like whatever the process. It's always a very smart assessment of things, but it's not the absolute truth, and not how things usually transpire. So the way I think about it often is like, essentially, like, I have checks and balances at every small step. Like, at this point of time, this is the ROI, right? Like, this is the cost that is gone, and this is like what I'm expecting out of it. Like, 2 years down the line, if I project it, am I seeing any benefit that is coming out of it, and do I still foresee benefits that are coming out of it? And at every stage, at every startup, I think there comes a point where you question, and not just at the beginning. Actually, I think we should take this question in a more holistic sense, that even midway, right, like you're struggling, like there are like every few months you're just like burning out of money, for instance, in the beginning. And there comes a point where you're like, there is a sunk cost. And I remember this conversation with one of my teammates where he's like, there is a sunk cost. You've already put in like 2 years of effort. What if this thing fails? Like, might as well just abandon ship and go. And I'm like, see, so that is where, I think that at that point is like more about how you personally feel about the situation. And often it's not logical. Like, you have a projection of things, but it's usually like, my assessment of it is there, if there's a 1% chance of making it work. And I do think that's very, very arrogant, but I was like, okay, I'm gonna take those chances. Like, I'm gonna go with it, see where it goes. And yeah, we survived that thing. But then, you're always standing on the shoulders of giants. You're building on other things. There are external forces at play, and it could have easily gone in the other direction. It's just like, so yeah, my 2 cents on making that decision would usually be MVP it. Like, have like a minimum viable product. Like, this is what you want to do the smallest iteration of it, like test it out with people, see what the response looks like. And if it works, great. Like, if it doesn't, go back to the drawing board and see. And if you're still feeling like doing it after the third or fourth iteration, then might as well jump in. But I think that's what the process looks like, and that's how startups work. But I think process of founding a startup is also like something we should MVP.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to ask a follow-up question on that to you, Ayushi. That you said that we are not our biggest hurdles in that case. In your case, it's absolutely not true, because you found a way to not procrastinate at all and just get right into execution at every stage. And I think that's what led to your success eventually.
No, you're making me sound more action oriented than I am. Go ahead.
Right. So I want to understand, how did you, because a lot of us, we do have those moments of self-doubt. We procrastinate a lot before we can actually jump in and say, this is what I want to do. So how did you build that? How did you inculcate that mindset, or how did you get over that battle of self-doubt, which we all have, and even procrastination for that matter?
I think Ritu was right. You never do. Because nothing is enough, right? You like, I'm pretty sure, like, if you've checked out like online, like you'll see like a bunch of words that kind of make it look fancy, or the story look fancy, and it's a narrative. Like, everything is a story built around whatever's happening. In reality, like, there is always self-doubt, no matter where you reach, what you become, what you're doing.
Right.
So one of my best friends actually jokes about this, like the way I handle it. And I don't know if it's a it's a methodology everybody could use, because it's not like super positive, but he's like, you're very ambitious and unambitious at the same time. So I plan for the worst case and best case at the same time, and I execute both plans simultaneously. So I'm like, in my head, what I'm talking out loud is usually the worst case. Like, I'm never really telling you what I'm planning for, but like, I'm usually, and I think the only other like startup founder who's probably I've heard of like retraining those words is funnily like um, uh, Tesla. Like, he essentially went like, you know what, like the entire point of SpaceX was, if I'm putting 50% of my net worth into it, the worst that could happen is like I'd lose 50%. And I was okay with that level of like risk, and like the ability to accept that you've already accepted defeat. So and there is this phrase, like I believe I read it in some book, which went like, accept the impending doom and then work unencumbered by fear. So for me, it's a lot like that. Like, I accept both sides, and then I work like, I distance myself from the scenario. And I think that mechanism to distance yourself could be different things. Like as Ritu was saying, it could be going out. Like for me, it's photography, writing. I travel, like I just would randomly leave for, like, I'm right now in Chandigarh for work, so I would randomly leave for like Shimla for a like day trip, like drove there, came back in like 5-6 hours. So just like clicked a bunch of pictures and came back, and it gives me the headspace to think. Now that process of distancing could be anything, but you will have to distance yourself from the situation, because if you don't, you would always constantly be guessing like, did I do the right thing? And I do that constantly. And if I do that, like, I would never be able to actually act or say or like, portray the right like narrative in front of the other person.
Absolutely. And you give us some very good strategies for us to start believing in ourselves, and we're going to go and implement that. So the next question is for you, Ritu. I want to understand, how did you implement data science in your idea? How do you use data science in your domain? What problems does it help you to solve?
I'll start with the Data Duck, which is a services firm. And we started in 2008 using, we were the first people, I think, to use data science to test creatives and UX. So because of my degree, I guess I had those tools and I was used to that method of inquiry. So it didn't seem weird for me or unnatural. I also, as Ayushi mentioned, super creative and always was like trying to figure out new interfaces and how to do things better. And in 2008, there weren't that many people in the space. So yeah, I just started to look at what websites, what graphical interfaces had which colors, had which fonts, what's the reason behind this, how are people behaving at a macro level, then doing a lot of A/B testing, and using data science to determine not just UX, but UI as well. So that's how it started, with small data, not big data. And now we've moved to using big data to determine some aspects of design, and we still do use tools like Betafy to do other levels of product research before we make decisions on behalf of other people. For the medtech company that we've recently set up, we've got 250,000 cases of brain surgeries. So what it has helped us do with DICOM data is just layer all of this one on top of the other. And then when people are going for surgeries and training how to be surgeons, they will, on our tool, make a cut here, and then then the tool will, I love the way I say it, then I'll say, but I am the voice of the tool. So then I say, in 98% of cases, this is fine. These are the 2% of cases where that has worked. It has not worked well, So, so I guess in both cases, data is really driving decision making, one in design and the other in something that I think all of us really care about, how surgeries of ours and our loved ones turn out. So we're facilitating, surgeries that with less error. And in the alumni tool, honestly, I have a lot of data that I don't know what to do with, and it's a great problem to have, and I'm sure I'll figure it out. But that's not why I'm doing it. I had a really below average alumni experience in the sense that my friends that went to the US had this amazing community and this amazing network, and Australia is known for good education but bad networking post. So I just feel like I wish I had a community to grow into, and so I just sort of created my own solution. Be the change you want to see in your own life and world. So we have data there, but I don't know how or what to do with it because of ethics and all that stuff is just jumbling in my head.
Right, and it's wonderful how you're using data science to become a trailblazer in your domain, and at the same time empower people with the data that they can use to take better decisions, right? So it's wonderful what you're doing. And next we'll move to you, Ramya, and I know that I'm going to get a lot of neuroscience terms, but how do you use data science in your domain?
So it's mostly machine learning where the brain has a lot of neurons that connect with each other to drive whatever we do, right? So any dysfunction in these circuits, there's specific circuits for specific causes and cases. So any dysfunction in these circuits relate to brain disorders or psychiatric disorders. So there are two ways to look at this. One is you internally eat medicines and the medicine works on the neurotransmitters in these brain circuitry. Or the second thing is you directly stimulate these neurons or stimulate these circuits. So what we are working on, this is the direct stimulation of these circuits. And you understand now each person and their dysfunction is unique to them. That's why no medicine is also more than 65-70% accurate in treating depression, in treating schizophrenia, in treating any psychiatric disorder. So what we are trying to do is non-invasively monitor these brain states and understand, can we map different depression stages for one person? Can we personalize it to each person? What change looks like in a depression case? How do they respond to different activities? Like your cognition reduces when you're depressed, your working memory, your energy levels, all of them contribute to different, your productivity decreasing in life, your enjoyment in life going down. So can we just uh, monitor instead of directly understanding from brain data? Can we use an indirect estimation, make you do a bunch of tasks, and in your response to tasks is what we analyze, and then map it and then map it to different stages of depression. This is all a work in progress, and this is how we are using the data science or machine learning in our product. Stimulation is your active therapy, and to understand where you stimulate and how you stimulate, we use the data.
I love the passion that you talk with, and I cannot believe that you're just a 2019 pass out. Your intelligence is beyond my comprehension. But next we'll move to Ayushi.
I mean, honestly, I want to just address something that you said. Like, I do this a lot where I think just because people know something, they're more intelligent than me. Like, this is something that we should, as women, also just get to eliminate at the starting level only. People, because I've been in this field like since the past 1.5 years. I know what I'm talking about because I've read all of this. That doesn't make me more intelligent than anybody else. So if you know something for more than a year, then you believe me.
You become a subject matter
exactly
expert.
like we should not address this.
Absolutely, but I'm just saying that it's wonderful that you're bringing in all this initiative at such a young age. Not many of us even thought about it at that age, so that's really commendable. And next we'll move to you, Ayushi, and we'll try to understand how you use data science in your company.
So there are multiple points that we are using like data science. Like initially, okay, this is tricky. So what really happens in the entire process is that you're having a drone fly in a particular pattern, right? So what pattern leads to the best amount of like 3D mapping? Like initially, you're essentially capturing images with a certain overlap, Okay, and this drone is like essentially fitted with a commercial grade camera. It doesn't matter what kind of camera, but like they have to have some overlap so that you are mapping each point across three images, like across three positions, and then you're trying to tell what is the Z axis. Now, in order to be able to tell like what is the pattern in which the drone is to fly, what is the area and what is the flight plans, the elevation at which the drone is to fly. So that is one set of the problem, right, which requires a fair amount of understanding of like elevation satellite data, but also understanding just avionics and like limitations of the drone, where we essentially try to automate the decision side of it for the people who are actually going on the ground and collecting the data for us. So like we essentially work sort of like an Uber, where we are giving like the entire flight plan and boundaries and the SOPs, and then of course after this point I have like quick reconstruction algorithms to be able to check if the data that was like collected did not have any gaps, like any major like loopholes, so that I don't get to find out about these things like much after like the operations have happened. Now this is purely like just the operation side of it. Once all of this imagery is here, then you are basically trying to reconstruct that data and merge it. At this point of time, this is entirely like 3D computing, merging of large data sets, making sure that you have a gigantic 3D, like sort of a textured sheet out of it. Once you have this textured sheet, which is like sort of an orthomosaic, it's an image, a gigantic one, like let's say a 400 square kilometer like worth of imagery with very high resolution. But it's an image if you're not able to understand and like what lies in it and make sense of it. Traditionally, all of this geospatial mapping in data has been done either on the field with like some guy taking a DGPS machine, like I'm sure you have seen like on the highways there is this like tripod kind of thingy which like everybody takes, like they're taking measurements at like regular intervals. So traditionally that's how it happens. That thing costs somewhere around like 1200 rupees per acre or per measurement, and then you're doing this repeatedly, and as you can imagine, like the machine has to be kept at that point for like almost 4 or 5 hours, so or 2 or 3 hours depending on the accuracy. So it takes months to be able to actually go through like large swaths of data. So now what we did was basically like we were initially only in the we were trying to essentially create the 3D side of data, and that is where we were pitching our tent. And then we sort of realized, okay, so I need to be able to tell insights from it or analytics from it, which is the point. Like, when we were giving these solutions, we realized okay, so urban development planners who are using it or anybody using it for any sort of insights would require these 14 geospatial features, which is where we sort of like started geotagging those features and creating a mother data set, which is like around 40 terabytes of data that's being used to train these algorithms to be able to find these features in the most complex geospatial geographies. Like India is complex when it comes to like yeah, if it works in Ayodhya, like your argument is that okay, it'll work in Seattle. So that's relatively straightforward. Like at least but you're also planning for different kinds of timings, different kind of exposures, what kind of like flight durations or timing there are. So this is one aspect of it. Then the last piece of it, which is kind of more of our work, like since in the last 1.5 year that we have seen, since COVID, we started opening up the platform to other types of geospatial data. So that included like mobility data, patient locations, like discharge data, like schemes that were being followed, volumetric tracking data, sensor data, and eventually like also drone live feed. So we started collating all of this data and pulling all of this with historic geospatial data as well. Not everything that is used here is there are different versions of different kinds of algorithms being used at different points, but and the intensity of data at each point varies. Like for instance, like for flight plans, like obviously there is not a lot of historic data available. For GIS, like particularly the GIS training for 14 tag like databases, like we actually had like manual tagging of those databases. So that's internally generated like a some other data set to train everything. And then there is like the other geospatial data sources, which usually come from a client. So because we act as an integrator, but then we started applying like prediction algorithms on top of that, because like most of the stuff was there already. So we started adapting and tweaking things, which is kind of where, but that is not something that happens out of the box. It's like more custom, where like, the problem is intriguing enough. So I'll be like, okay, what can we do with it? So yeah.
Yeah, and from the sound of it, I can guess that this must require a huge workforce. And the next part that I want to understand is, how do you hire new team members? What do you look for in the new employees that you hire?
Mostly curiosity and a capacity to actually to actually like challenge yourself, and like be okay with the fact that like your career graph would not look the same as your peers. I think
Right.
that's crucial, like to be able to join any early stage startup. But it also depends on the type of job role you're looking for, right? Like for instance, if I'm looking for a core technical team member, I am looking to potentially, let's say, give him equity in the future, then that's a different sort of commitment versus like, let's say, the teams that were essentially like brought together for handling the operations or
Right.
the manual tagging when all of that was happening. So we at one point of time were like upwards of 50 people. At this point of time is just like 10 people with AIML and like GIS expertise. And those 50 people essentially included a lot of like operations expertise as well, which is not required anymore. So it depends. And the way we hire is usually fresh out of college,
Mhm.
but with a master's or like with a PhD and some experience of dealing with any of the technologies that we have dealt with. We do realize that the conjunction we're talking about is fairly like unique. So being able to do that in college is a ridiculous ask, like with these kind of data sets. So there is like almost like a 6-month training process. As far as management is concerned, that is relatively easier to hire. You already know that the industries that we target, we already know like the people where networks are. So anybody who can potentially sell emerging tech in a very incumbent industries where like our like sales like workforce would lie.
Absolutely. And I think they also need to believe in the idea, and they need to be passionate about the cause. And I think after that, they can
Most of the
easily
time
line.
you're asking a person to take a financial hit and work more.
Yeah.
So that does translate into them believing in the idea, or at least the team enough to be like, okay, I'm going to put this on the line, see where it goes for the next 2 years minimum. Yeah.
Yeah, I get it. So next we'll move to you, Ramya, and we want to understand, what do you look for in your new hires? How do you motivate them?
Yeah, so honestly, our company started over the lockdown period, and all of our conversations with interns or potential employees has happened over Zoom, right? So, one of the major things that we have looked at while hiring is integrity. Like, is the person following up right? Um, can they communicate well what they're doing? Can they be, if they're not able to meet a certain deadline, attend a certain meeting, are they telling us in advance, or are they at the last moment like, I'm sorry, I cannot do this now? Or I mean, these are basic things that you cannot do without.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we've not meet core technical hires as of yet, so I don't have as much experience in this area, so I would like defer to the other panelists. But I just wanted to add my 2 cents in saying that integrity is paramount. And
Yeah.
second, just them understanding the impact that their work has on actual people and mental health and depression in particular.
Right. And I think that more and more people, when they're hiring, should think about this, because we usually prioritize skill over attitude, but in the end, it's about the attitude and the character of the person, which really pays off in the long run. So I want to understand your perspective on this too, and I want to see what is your hiring process? What does it look like, and what do you look for in the ideal candidate?
I'm not sure if I'm the right person to answer this because I don't know. I tend to go a lot on gut, and I tend to and I know that that's really difficult for other people to sort of copy and paste, right? It's not, and I tend to go with heart space. I feel like if I connect with the person, they're someone I want to have on my team. They're someone I want to spend time with. They're someone that obviously meets the base level requirements of the job. Like, so say there's 10 people with the base level requirements and I'm interviewing them. It's the people who's spark in their eye, who's, you know, who seem earnest, who seem like they care, who seem like they're not here. See, we have a really unstructured environment, and I need to be able to find someone who's agile and not stuck in their ways. So if we, but yet is process driven enough that it doesn't go crazy, you know? So I just go with my gut and try to assess their personality. And I also get team leads to pick their own candidates initially. So I just end up picking from the ones that the team leads want, you know? I think it's really important to give agency to managers to hire their own people.
Yeah, and that's a very unconventional approach to hiring. And I'm glad that you brought it up, because it's a different way of looking at this process. And it's very different from the normal structured hiring that we usually do at the other companies. And now that we've talked about hiring new employees, the next thing that I want to talk about is how, if once we hire the employees, how do we keep the existing employees happy? So we'll start with you, Ayushi. I want to understand, how do you drive your employees? What picture do you paint in their minds of the company that can help them to be motivated at all times?
There is just one picture, right? Like, you are all like, I think this is something I realized actually in grad school. Like, when you're studying finance separately from marketing, you're studying, like, you know, the tech separately from this. It's not, it's just one company. It's all like adding up to that one whole, which I think everybody needs to understand, like, how the pieces are actually influencing each other, more so in smaller companies where you can't actually work with only your department expertise. So I think Ritu has it right, like, in the sense that like, you know, you have to be able to see that they can, like, actually go above and beyond, like, the skill level that is required. So the way I motivate, or actually I don't even try to, like, my usual attempt at, like, you know, is to give a very honest picture. Like, if it's something that's going really well, like, let's say, for example, like, at this point of time we are implementing one of the largest implementations of geospatial intelligence across the entire state of Punjab. Now, speaking purely as a drone company, which is like working on the integration of drone data with geospatial intelligence, it's a huge opportunity. So, like, and it's also like, you have to keep in mind, these are like, you know, 20 somethings doing this. So there is always this context, like, where you are seeing that what you're doing is exciting, what you're doing is like something that your peers, or like somebody who's graduated from your college, would probably see like 3 decades down the line, and then would oversee. Like, right now you're implementing it yourself and you have that amount of access. So I think that experience counts for a lot. And I think that agency, like, because like I usually like work when I'm working with technical teams also, it's not that like I am somebody who likes to give them their own space. I mean, as much as I'd like to think that that is the case, partially it's also like I don't always have bandwidth. So like, you also like have to let go a lot, that okay, you handle this part, I like look at this part. And I think in the process, like, you also, like, you know, get, like, you have them take responsibility of, like, you know, tiny pieces of the baby that you've made. Like, it's sort of like having tutors, like
Dedicating it to them.
yeah, he's taking care of piano lessons. So there is that one aspect of it. And I think for each employee, like, when they start acting that this is, like, you know, their own baby, this is like their own company, that is when you know that, like, it's not the remuneration keeping them. Then you just have to make sure that the work is exciting. Like, there isn't a lull, there is always an intellectual stimulation at play. And nobody is dying of hunger. So that's kind of like what the like, you know, prioritization looks like. But I think it's also because, I mean, I guess if I were to say it in HR lingo, our generation is notorious for trying to find like meaning in work, which is not something that has always existed. But having said that, like, some of the some of the most dedicated hires we have had. Like I have like Poonam on my team with like a kid, like left a very stable career with like she was working with the country head one of the largest geospatial and companies in India, and worked there for almost 10, 11 years, and then like moved to a startup completely, worked with like no structure, set things up from like and you reciprocate then eventually, right? And it wasn't something where I had to like, it was just somebody like who wanted to have something, you gave them like a space to do this, that here, take it, because I can't handle it anymore, so yeah, you all hands on deck, please feel free. So I think like that also happens. So like it's always a mix, like you played by ear a little bit.
Right, and it's important to give them the platform and show them the genuine picture so that they can decide for themselves. And once they take that decision, then they just own it by.
Honestly, I think it's always very transparent, right? Like you have to at all points understand that everybody is like intelligent in their own ways. Like if they go to a bunch of meetings with you, if they actually witness or they analyze the decisions that you're making, they would realize what is happening. And often, right, like for example, there would always be comparisons drawn with like, let's say my peer working here is doing this, why am I like essentially like, comparison drawn to deployed at like such a short notice, like why is our workload not like well distributed, for instance, things like that come up, like particularly at work. And then you sort of have to translate that, okay, these are the requirements that or these are the variables that I was facing, based on these, like, and like, make sure that you're communicating at every step of the way, that okay, so this is what it looks like right now, but and this is where I think you can contribute, and but this is how the situation would evolve, these are the two pathways, and we'll like take accordingly. So I think that's sort of like that's I should say that that's not how men like to lead typically. That's not a typical idea of leadership. Like the like transparency is not something like, that's been considered
It's
like
usually diplomatic, yeah.
Yeah, it's not even diplomatic. It's always a facade of infallibility and invincibility that you go with, that no, I know everything, I know exactly what I'm doing. It's just like I guess like is personal, that style. In my case, I personally prefer that there is that transparency, because I just think that infallibility or invincibility in business is a myth. Nobody really knows. You're always projections, and based on those projections, you're taking a call. So that decision has to be supported by facts, and usually your employees know the facts, so there's no point in hiding.
Absolutely, and you make a great point over there, and I think more and more of us should try to adopt that strategy. Leadership is very personal, and if we can customize it to be ourselves, then we can do a better job at what we're doing. So for you, Ritu, I have a question from the audience, and maybe you can give your perspective on this. So the question is from Kirti, and she says that should you be flexible with new hires, or should you put a penalty on them if they make any mistake on their part, especially when you don't have any official contract with them? And I guess you'll be able to see this question in the chat, if yeah, because she's talking about her experience as well in this.
Sure, I think it depends on two variables here, right? How senior is the person we've hired, and what is the level of the mistake. I'm assuming that's what the default. So right. If the person's very, very senior, and for example, what they do is abuse their power, for a Me Too sort of situation, that's out. Like, that's just not okay. That, I guess, when we do have younger hires, what we do is have a 3-month probation period. A lot of times we actually talk more to their managers about how to overcome certain and I make mistakes today. So like, if someone gets chucked out for making a mistake, no one would be working, like we would have nobody. So I think we should enable people to make mistakes. We should enable people to be vulnerable. We should enable them to fail fast and fail hard and come back. And like, that's really what I believe. And there are certain things that you just cannot do in the workplace. And there's certain things that you just absolutely cannot do in my team, which is, belittle someone, not be a team player, lie, these sorts of things. There's no tolerance for that. But apart from core human values that meet our organizational values, I think everything else is, if it's a true mistake, it's a mistake. And, we're a team. We'll move past it. We've made a mistake of signing. I've made a mistake with our legal team of signing a contract and dropping a zero. So that makes a massive difference in our bottom line P&L. We won a tender because we dropped a zero. It's, so you mess up and it's okay.
Yeah, I think if we can give them the leeway to realize the mistake that they made and get back up and again start from where they were, this time with better experience of handling the things, then we can definitely forgive them. And my next question is for you, Ramya. I know that you don't have a lot of experience in the hiring, so I want your perspective on this. That when you're trying to, let's say that someone is trying to start their own business, at what point should they start looking for a co-founder, or what quality should they look for in that partner if they are going to rely on the co-founder for that?
Right. So honestly, the way I found my co-founder is basically we started working on projects together, and then we just worked well together. Like we understood each other's working style, and we took feedback off of each other, and it was a very collaborative working style. We respected each other, and then you just become passionate about the idea, and then it just comes together. It's not like I choose you as my co-founder. It's it was much more organic, like from personal experience. But looking back, over all of the time that I've spent, I would say again, integrity is like my number one quality. Basic things that you have to take care of, like should not lie, or just do things on time, or if you cannot, like just be accountable.
Right.
And then second, you should be able to, you should respect them, you should be able to work with them, and just respect. Next is, are they motivated to learn and grow? Are they agile, right? Will they constantly be on their toes, learning and growing? And next is just ability to accept feedback. I mean, as simple as that.
And that's so important.
Yes.
The ability to take even the negative feedback, for that matter.
Yes, take and give also. I mean, both, it goes both ways. But can you not let ego come into the picture and just, can you give and take feedback from a completely objective place and for the future of your company?
Right, and I think this drills down to the point that Ritu brought up, that it's about the core human values in the end. Anything else can later be acquired. So Ayushi, we'll move on to you, and we'll try to understand what is it that you look in a founder, and in what stage can we decide that this is the time that I'm going to look for a co-founder. It's getting too much for me to handle, so I need someone to delegate responsibilities to.
First of all, I don't think you can delegate anything to a co-founder. Like, they usually strut about as if they own the place. So, like, it's usually a more democratic process, hopefully. But I think, like, honestly, like, I think somebody in another university had asked me this question. I usually found it through my network, like, and I used to hate this word network when I was in grad school. Like, what on earth is this? Like, this shallow conversation of, like, small talk that it entails, that how are you, how's the weather kind of thing. But in reality, like, when I look back, like, my first company came with like 3 other individuals who were all Johns Hopkins, were my classmates at school, and I had worked with them. Like, we were essentially in the graduate lounge where, like, I'm like, creating things and testing on the other student population. So it's like, that's how it was. And then the second startup, again, like, it also stemmed from another my co-founder is also from Hopkins. We took a class together at school, and in fact, like my last co-founder, this co-founder also know each other. So like it was like it's a very tiny world,
Yeah.
and I think eventually, of course, like as you grow older, like before, like when you've stepped into the workforce, your network is your school, your like friends, and the only people you can recruit is basically like your friends. So like people you've worked with who have the skill set, who can supply what you need and like fill that gap. And then the other side of things is when you've already worked for a little bit, let's say 5-10 years, maybe 15 years. At that point of time, of course, you can like get a co-founder for an expertise that okay, I'm gonna hire a CTO and who knows like ABCD things, and then like this is what he wants, and like, and that's, I think, like it's a conversation I'm pretty sure that even Mark Zuckerberg didn't have. Like it was like for startups that come out of college, like particularly, they're usually not that structured. Like they don't structure like in terms of like job responsibilities, the transactions that's going to happen, and it's something you sort of figure out like over a period of time. But of course, like if startups are done by people who are like already have like some work ex behind them, they also have more to lose, right? So the structure is a lot more stringent, and I think it's just something that you acquire over a period of time.
Yeah, I think it's just a skill that comes with time, and again, this is something that's organic, as Ramya said.
It's
It's
not
not
even
going to
a
be.
skill. It's actually like it's
Is it
context. It's
maybe
no.
your intuition as well, right?
Yeah, and not really. Like to be honest, like if today, if somebody asked me 10-15 years down the line, like if I join another company, like let's just say a hypothetical scenario, if I join another company, like what is the stake I want? So this would all be run by market dynamics, right? At that point of time, like I would have had like subject matter expertise in a certain domain. Like
Yeah.
there is already like for that kind of an expert, there is already a set idea of this is what the remuneration looks like, this is what the portion of equity looks like, this is what like the stage of the startup is, and based on that like you make these decisions, and then you can negotiate like 5-10% margin. Like that delta is small, versus when you're doing it in college, everything is up for negotiation. You don't know what anybody is contributing. So in fact, even with investors, right, like for early stage startups that are happening like initially, like particularly B2C startups, like they're also trying to figure out like what everybody is doing, which part is coming from where. And it's something that you also like break things and learn, sort of.
Yeah, it's a journey, and there are a lot of things to figure out. So next we move to you, Ritu, and tell us how someone should look for a co-founder and when they do that. What is your perspective on this?
I don't know. I think it's all our own individual journeys. Honestly, I really struggle to co-own things. I recently got married, and the fact that my dog loves him as well is like difficult for me. So I'm not sure how good I am with sharing. So the co-founder thing is a tough one for me to answer. Just I think I know that at some point it it may serve my company better to have a co-founder than to hire talent. But till now, I've sort of just paid market rate and hired.
Right. And the next aspect that I want to cover here, I'm getting a little personal here. I want to understand what are the challenges that the three of you faced when you started this company, and how did you navigate through those challenges to still build resilience and keep going? So we'll start with you, Ramya. Tell us about what are the challenges that you've encountered along the way.
For now, I don't see any big roadblocks that I had to overcome. It's mostly uh, personality or changing your mindset about a certain, about certain things, like prioritization, being able to sell your vision, sell your idea. I think that's super important. And especially in India, in our country, we are taught engineering, we're taught math, but we're not taught to explain or be able to explain it to another person. um, we're also made to work for other people, not as just not build something on your own. So it
Right.
gets challenging. Then you set out to explain to people what you're trying to do. It's a skill that, it just doesn't come. You have to develop, explain to many people what you're trying to do, and slowly you'll understand how they respond to what things, and how you can tailor what you're doing to different people so that they understand. I think that's one of the biggest things, and I think managing people is still a challenge that I'm trying to understand and overcome. Uh, People are hard, uh, especially over Zoom. It's a little challenging to know how each person will turn out, or like how the relationship will turn out. Yeah. So that's still a work in progress. Maybe in a year, I'll come back and share my learnings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we'll have you back next year, and then we'll ask you the same question again. So the next question is for you, Ayushi. I want to understand if you were to give any advice to someone who's to a woman, especially who's starting a business, what would that advice be?
I think I already sort of gave it. Like, my only advice would be if you wanted to do something, if you had an idea,
Hmm.
just prototype it. Like, do the smallest risk that is involved and try it and see like how the feedback looks like. Because I think like the problem that most often people have like while entering entrepreneurship is they think too much. And I think like the closest thing that I can find is like there's a Jean-Paul Sartre quote about falling in love. Like you have to find the person, you have to meet, like you have to fall in love with them, and then there is always this abyss that you have to jump across. And if you think too much, you would never jump. And I think
Right.
that's true for entrepreneurship also. Like if you had time to think, you would never do it. And that's just because it just doesn't make sense. Like when you're looking at these on like newspaper stories, like there is like people becoming millionaires, there are IPOs happening, but in reality, like there is what like a 2% chance of actually like any startup surviving across 2 years. And like we're not even talking about millionaires or billionaires right now, right? So it's just that the statistical likelihood of you making it is very low. Logically this does not make sense. It has to be something else that works. And I think the way my professor like used to actually like start any entrepreneurship class used to be by asking, like, if you had $1 million, like $1 billion and no constraints, what would you do? And I think like that's where the thought
Hmm.
process like started from. And like, okay, so now you don't have the $1 billion and
Now
you
what do
wanted
you
to
do?
start something. So
Yeah.
now what would you do? And like you iterate from that point onwards. Okay, so like how can we get like, let's say, and smallest sum of money. So for some companies, like let's say for
Hmm.
what Ramya is doing, that requires investment, and that requires like initially you won't be able to move a needle like without actually being able to like having gone through a 10-year process of like actually testing, vetting, like releasing the data. Versus for some other companies, let's say you want to have like an online store of jewelry, for example, right? Like you can immediately iterate it. Like you can just put it on WhatsApp, start selling it to your friends, then like put it on Instagram, start selling it to strangers. And at each point you're basically pushing it, like seeing that, okay, are these like 50 people buying it only because they like me? Let's just try selling it to like people who don't like me.
Right.
And then like like essentially build from that point onwards. But I think I'll also like address like sort of mixing answers here, like as to
Yeah.
what asked Ramya, like the personal the struggle. I think that is part of the prototyping, because like
Hmm.
it's basically about being fearless, this, and like losing that fear of what would happen. And for me, the biggest personal challenge was losing that fear of like having lived with security always. So like with this company, or like even before, like I like before that point I was like living with four dudes, like three dudes. And like we bought a house super cheap, and we thought like we're gonna like each have like our own rooms, and we'll have like ACs working and stuff. Now we realized the reason it was cheap was because the ACs didn't work in the rest of the room. So, so everybody was camped in the drawing room, and now this drawing room was like, we were like, you will just move like after some point. So like everybody just had there was no point in furnishing it if you're gonna move. So we just like had like mattresses, and then a bunch of tables to work on, and then I was actually on a sleeping bag for almost 8 months. And I think the thing that it does is so if I tell this story to my mom, and it'd be yeah, so we didn't have sugar, and I would just add maple syrup to my coffee and just chug it, and my mom would be like what hardships were you living under? But then I think that the reality is, okay, yeah, it was doing a function. And it is what is it that you need out of things, and like what does it to take to get there? Like one of the biggest hurdles I see in like my friends who wanted to do something like this is basically the idea, no, I also want this, like I want the cup to be fancy, I want to this also, I want a life that is fancy also, but I also want to do this. No, that all of it doesn't come together unless you were like born rich. Right? So you have to pick and choose, and I think functionally you should be able to make those choices, and at every stage in life that changes, right? Like now I'm not in a sleeping bag, but like it's just something that every stage in life your functional would change, but you should be able to draw that boundary, that what are you willing to give up for what you want, and that's the only question that matters.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway from your advice is to be incremental and to prioritize things, right? Because you cannot have everything at once, but you just have to start at some point and then uh, maybe convert it gradually. And my next question is to you, Ritu. I want to understand that as women, we usually get these advices from people where we are told to just put our heads down and work. And I want to understand, how did you choose to challenge all of these stereotypes that exist in the industry? And how did you overcome these, I call them the toughies, these people who constantly try to discourage you? How did you overcome handling those people and handling all of this discouragement and the lows along the way?
I think I had a trump card, and my trump card's my parents. They've always had my back, and I have messed up more times than I can admit in the next 10 minutes or whatever, but they've always believed in me, and this like unshakable belief has kind of translated into an unshakable belief that I have in me. So no matter, I don't really see my companies as my assets. I see myself as my asset. So I think that when people say, oh, you can't do this, you can't do that, like it just, I'm like, honestly, it's a bit foolhardy, because I went to Denmark. We had a project in Denmark, and I was in Copenhagen, and I'd never ridden a bike. This was only a couple of years ago. So to start learning how to ride in your late 30s on ice is not a great idea. But this foolhardy, like, if someone else can do it, I can do it too. I just took the bike and started riding. And yeah, it was scary, but I just kind of dove in. And I think when you have a soft landing pad, emotionally, it really helps. And we've touched upon, Ayushi touched upon the finance thing. When I was in uni in Melbourne, I was homeless. I was living out of my car for 6 months. And today, I think my soft landing pad is the fact that I'm Australian. So if anything really goes terribly, topsy-turvy, I just go back, It's sort of like I have these two phenomenal landing pads, emotionally and financially. So I don't actually think I take as much risk as other people may perceive, because not everyone has these two landing pads. So
Yeah.
It's always a measure. How high we jump is always a measure of how low we can fall as well. So, and how quickly we can get up. So I'm very grateful and in great admiration for women without that, who still go for it, and who don't have families that would support them, like kya kahenge, log kya kahenge, which in I like, my parents, I actually told my parents one day, like, if I do this log kya kahenge, they're like, we're the only log you need to be worried about. And we say you're awesome. So it was really good for me. I'm not sure if people around me benefit as much from my self-belief as I do. But I genuinely think it's I feel awesome.
It's
I'm
good.
my
And I
first
think
love.
You go
I'm my
there.
first love. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that building the muscle of resilience, it's not very easy, and it's good that you had a support system like that. But there are women who, even if they want to do something, no matter how many hurdles they face, they still find a way to overcome all of that and still do it anyway.
Yeah, and those are the women we need to be celebrating today. Like, it's just phenomenal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so considering this, I want to understand you all three of you must have had some role models in front of you, and maybe those role models motivated you to keep going even when there might have been points where you did not believe in yourself, but you still looked at your role models and you knew that you anyway had to do it. So we'll start with you, Ayushi. Who's your role model, and what inspires you the most from them?
Um, so if I were giving my Oscar speech, I would be like, my parents, my mom, like, who really like contributed to who I became. And I think that's true in the sense that there is the intellectual capacity. And like, for instance, I lost my father pretty early. So she paved the way for my entire education. So the grit comes from there. But I think like in terms of actual work life, I grew up like, idolizing a lot of people like Indra Nui, and like you have the Chanda Kochers, you have these business women, right? But eventually I realized like those are not the people I would actually be able to archetype. Like eventually when I get there, like I wouldn't really fall in the same mold. And I think like what I did personally was actually create an Excel sheet, and like, I started like charting all the people that I followed, like how long I followed. Like, yes, it's creepy. Like, it's a stalking level. Like, how long have I Googled a person, and it included like on what reasons, like, what adjectives I would be interested into, like what triggers this. So once I did this entire math, I realized it's actually like it's a mix. Like I like a bunch of academics, I like a bunch of poets and political activists, a bunch of lawyers, and then like a bunch of like and then like of course the starter world, like Nykaa is an amazing, like I don't see why and nobody's talking about like Nykaa when we spend so much time on Flipkart, like just because like and I think it's way more successful. It was way more like beautifully executed as far as an e-commerce platform was concerned. Like the strategy was bang on, nothing fell wrong, and like they didn't sell. Like they're probably gonna IPO at the end of the year. Like there are people, but at the end of the day, like I think more so than ever, like now this generation has a choice to actually like choose who your role model could be, tweak the parts and personalize the role model as well. Like what works for you, what doesn't work for you. And personally, in terms of female mentors, like I've actually never met anybody like within the professional sphere where I was like, okay, this lady who is who I want to be. That has like always been like I've always been mentored by a bunch of gentlemen. And I think like that's not a good or bad thing. Like you're actually like it's sort of like a book, like buffet. You pick like certain skills from certain people, and like that's sort of who you become eventually. And like at each point you change a little bit. And yeah, so I mean, I would just say pick the 4 or 5 that work for you and tweak the role model a little bit for what suits you.
Yeah, I think what I can understand from your answer is that you just have to treat your role models as a board of directors so that you can have a diverse panel.
Don't so much autonomy, but okay, otherwise.
Obviously, and with your Nika's example, I think you've won quite a lot of viewers' hearts, because a lot of us are Nika fans here. So thank you for
No, I
mentioning.
was like talking to my boyfriend, and he was like, "Who be this woman?" And I was like, "What are you talking about? Like, you know the Bansal guys, you don't know this woman."
Yeah. So we'll move on to you, Ramya, and I want to understand from you, if we set out to find our mentors, how do you think we can do that?
Okay, so I might not be the best person to ask this question because I was very, very fortunate to have been part of this Plaksha network. Um, like as Kartika was also part of the same network, she would tell you, we have entrepreneurs, leading entrepreneurs from all over the country, especially Indian Americans coming back, wanting to give back to India, set up this amazing fellowship and amazing university. And we happened to be the first batch of this fellowship that they were launching, and we had amazing people like Hitesh Oberoi is my startup mentor also, an advisor. He amazing guy. Then Mohit Thukral. Then there is people who have who are the CEOs of billion-dollar companies, and who've raised $1 billion, and successfully exited companies at multi-million-dollar valuations. And the recurring theme in all of that is that once you reach a certain a stature, you want to eventually give back, है ना? And if you can find such individuals through your network, your college network, your alumni network, that seed of wanting to give back, I think it's there in majority of people. Like after a certain point, and you just have to appeal to that seed, like tell them how much you'll improve under their guidance, tell them how much of impact they can have, tell them, share with them your story, share with them what their mentorship could do for you as a person. It always helps in knowing that you would be part of someone's life journey. At the end of the day, like, it's not about the material things, it's about how many lives have you touched. And I think that just appeals to people. And it's hard to find mentors, but uh, like, I mean, welcome to Plaksha.
Sure.
um,
Yeah.
yeah.
And mentorship is more like friendship. You cannot simply go to a person and ask them, "Will you be my mentor?" and then they just say
Oh, I
yes.
tried.
You can.
I tried a bunch of time. It doesn't work now.
Yeah,
I was
it
looking for
doesn't
female
work.
mentors pretty bad actually. That was desperate.
And if you have a structure that these people fall into, that genuinely helps. Like, if there is a structure where they have to help you, or you have a daily conversation
Yeah.
or a weekly conversation with them, somehow that relationship uh, goes on. Like, because you don't find yourself or your connection in the first two meetings, you find your connection as you go on. Or generally,
Yeah.
people who are obliged to work with you sometimes turn into your mentors. Like, it's not always like at the get-go they agree to or they stick to that mentorship role.
Yeah, again, I think this is something that the we talked about this previously. And it's again organic. You have to build that relationship over some time, and eventually you get to a point where you don't have to say that you are my mentor, but you're already doing all the things that are necessary, and you are getting their guidance, and that's when you know that that person is already your mentor. So we'll move to you, Ritu, and I want to understand that mentors is one thing, but then you also have sponsors and allies, right? Where who can talk about you and who can nominate you in rooms that you cannot be present in. So how can we find sponsors and allies when we are starting our career?
I think the Ayushi and Ramya have both talked about networking. And it's one of those things that, like friendship, can be a hit or miss. And, you need to pour into it more than what you get out. I feel that being a connector, the more people you connect without expecting anything in return, that's one of the best ways to build goodwill. And I think then, at least that's worked for me. It's not a strategy that I worked on or read about. I just genuinely like to connect people, um, because I think that's where magic happens. And I'm constantly trying to set up my friends. So if you ever become my friends, please be single, because it gives me so much joy to set people up. So yeah, I love connecting people, and it's very dangerous. I yeah, it's terrible. Sometimes friends lie and say, yeah, we went on the date, like, just so I get off their back. But yeah, I just think that if you promote other people, as Ramya said, we're all good at heart, and if someone does us a favor, we actually end up doing a bigger favor for them in return. And that's most of humanity. There may be 5% or 1% that doesn't do it, but I think the odds are pretty good, to bet on that kind of approach.
Absolutely. And I think with pandemic, we've got more of such opportunities because people initially would just travel to different conferences and they wouldn't have time, but now they can increasingly find time for coffee chats and to support someone, to give back to the community. And you reach a point in your life where you think that now you need some soul searching. Now you need to help some people, and I think that has to come constantly. You constantly have to try and give back to the community. So Ayushi, I want to understand from you, what are the strategies that you followed to get your mentor?
So I was laughing all along because like the thing is there was always structure. Like I mean within Hopkins, like we had mentors like for, I mean I was doing a class on CS entrepreneurship and innovation, and then of course like I was part of a bunch of incubation centers. But I think like the relationships that I've always shared with my mentors like usually goes beyond like I'm an agonizingly long email writer, like and I'm not even a coffee chat person. Like it's not even like I'm gonna ask for your time and like here is my problem, I wanted your advice. So that's another thing, I take advice a lot. Like I'm usually like, I think that's something that I was like sort of picking up on when I was working a lot with consultants, and also almost became one myself. Like always like work with the client as if like think with me, and then just be like, okay, so if this were the problem, how would you because I would constantly be posing like the questions I have to them, and then be like, okay, so these are the variables I'm dealing with. I think the other side of it, and I think this is just me, you have whatever you have, right? Like skill sets. So
Right.
I talk like a lot of like, I usually don't talk business. Like if I'm meeting a person like a client, it doesn't matter, I don't talk business. Like it could be Urdu poetry, it could be like painting, and or like some random topic on the like on the face of earth, or like if I'm actually talking business, then I'm usually like painting a vision. So I think contrary to a lot of people, I am not a how person, I'm a why person. And I think that's like a very startup-y like kind of a distinction. So the mentors I've usually found are people who understand and vibe on the why. So like my professor at Hopkins like is usually like we would exchange the photographs I've clicked, and then I'll just like go question by question on like what I'm facing at this point, and like these are the challenges, and this is what I'm doing right now, what do you say? And this is like what we do every fortnight, even like US India. And like even people otherwise, like I usually like, I'm a texting person. I'm like a victim of my generation. Like I don't call, I just like text. But I usually give like again agonizingly long messages. Okay, this is what's happening? Like point wise, very structured. But yeah, and the other way I keep engaging with people is actually like sharing a lot of my artistic produce also in a thought process. So because that way I get a lot of feedback about the amorphous things that you don't get about work, right? Like if you're talking
Yeah.
about like form or that form, this process or that process, it's a very objective thing that a person can agree or disagree with. But I think it's better if you're trying to engage a person to talk about the more subjective things in life, and that could be anything. But yeah, like it's just like being able to assess how they think and being able to resonate with that.
Yeah, and I think with that we come to the end of this panel discussion, but it's been really great talking to all of you, and your faces literally light up when you talk about your company because you're that passionate about it. So it was really good. And one thing that I'm going to go and try now is going to try maple syrup in my coffee and see how it tastes because Ayushi's really got me
Not
tempted.
recommended now.
Right. So Karthika, you can take over from here. Thank you so much, all of you, for your answers.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Ketki. Wonderfully moderated. Thank you so much, Ritu, Ramya, and Ayushi. It's a working day, and plus you guys are entrepreneurs. I mean, we have taken 1.5 hours out of your life. It's a great honor for us. Thank you so much, and happy International Women's Day. Um, Lastly, before we wind up, I would just like to thank our partners, Technovanza and Shenomics. I'll just play a video from Shenomics. They have started a new program. Is my screen visible?
I don't think we can hear the video.
I think you've stopped sharing.
Yeah, I'm sharing.
Or we could just brief.
Yeah. Julian, do you want to brief about Shenomics?
Okay, basically, Shenomics has a fellowship program that helps. It has 40 seats, and it is it's called Lead Like a Girl. The video you're going to see is basically encouraging people to apply for that program, and it's basically asking you to know, like, lead with authenticity. Lead. Everybody has their own ways to lead, and leading like a girl is nothing but leading with your own authenticity. So we'll be sharing the links to that, and we're really grateful to actually pitch something like this for 21-year-olds and above. So do take part if you are interested, and do share the word. And thank you so much once again. I loved the session, and I'm so glad we have a recording of this. Gonna replay and watch all of those parts again and share it all over again.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and lastly, I would also like to thank Technovanza. They also have their event 11, 12, 13, 14. Amazing speakers, amazing events. We'll share all the links in the YouTube description. Thank you so much again for staying with us.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much. Bye,
Thank you
everyone.
so much. It has been a pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you so much.